Albin Kurti, the leader of the movement for self-determination in Kosova. And as Professor said, I'm here today to first talk and then debate about the case of Kosova as a case of international protectorate, probably a distinctive case which has repercussions, which has repercussions all over the world. I will start first of all by discussing a bit about the presence and the role of European Union. European Union is not building a state in Kosovo, but a member state. A year or so ago, Peter Faith, the international civilian representative, said that Kosovo will have sovereignty for one day, on the day that it will delegate it to European Union by being included into European Union. In this sense, EU integration is not really a choice. We are not allowed to have the question what society and state we want, and then to have European Union integration as a part of the answer, but we have first the answer which blocks the possibility of question. So our first problem as a movement with EU integration is the fact that when it comes to, let's say, state building in Kosovo, European Union is not helping us to build a state, but rather is directly building a member state, which will remain independent, yet without sovereignty. And at the end of this long process, after many years, will have sovereignty for only one day, the day when, in a sovereign manner, will delegate that sovereignty into Brussels. While we are still not integrated nominally into a real and present European Union, we are being integrated spiritually into virtual, ideal, and future European Union. In this way, we are caught in European Union dream. We are distinctive part of the dream that EU has for itself. Meanwhile, outside of this dream, it is EU which is trying to integrate into Kosovo rather than the other way around. EULEX is the greatest European security and defense policy mission out of 22 such EU missions around the world. It has 1,900 policemen, prosecutors, and judges who are part of this EU mission. This EU mission is called EULEX. EULEX, which defines itself as a crisis management operation. And actually, EULEX represents what used to be the first pillar of UNMIC, Department of Justice and Police. So, in this sense, EU continues, just like UN, to invest in what Pierre Bourdieu said called the right hand of the state, a repressive apparatus, judicial system, prosecution, police, etc., and not in the so-called left hand of the state, which would be education, culture, health, socioeconomic development. A couple of years ago, to the office of our movement in Pristina came around 30 students from University of Constance, Germany. And they came to talk to us, and I see in their master program is written the title conflict management. I asked them what happened to the word resolution. It was such a nice word, conflict resolution. Now it's conflict management, as if the conflict is here to stay. It has merely to be managed. But again, for me was no wonder where does this expression comes from. It comes from the concept of crisis management, which was endorsed by Javier Solana in July of the year 2006, while he was in a position of EU High Representative and in charge of foreign and security policy. So it was first Brussels who endorsed this concept, then academia came to Kosovo and to Bosnia, doing their master programs, and in the end, we had EULEX as embodiment of this concept. And as we know, EULEX, as I said, defines itself as crisis management operation. Their basis is the document called Joint Action Plan of Council of Europe, and the Article 3H of this plan puts executive powers of EULEX in Kosovo, where these executive powers are unlimited in scope and in time. So for anything that they might consider that they should be using executive powers, they can use them, and there is no limitation in time for using these executive powers. And secondly, all members of EULEX in Kosovo, they have immunity from legal prosecution together with their families. So in this sense, they are placed above the law, while they say they are for the rule of law, which means that they are actually rulers of law. So law is not a judicial instance which unites us in front of it and below it, but it is precisely a political instance which separates locals from internationals working in EULEX. Likewise, it's also very problematic who would like to become a policeman, a judge, or a prosecutor in a foreign country, while working in a mission which does not recognize that foreign country, as EULEX does not recognize Independent Republic of Kosovo. And that's why there are a lot of personal incentives for all the people who work within the structures and of EULEX. So I could name just a few of them. Rapid advancement in career. Probably in their own countries they would have to wait for years, maybe decades, to have that advancement in career. In Kosovo that is possible much faster. Then they pay no taxes. Their salary is at least double and usually triple of what they would get in their own countries. They don't have to live the consequences of the decisions they make, and there is no accountability toward the people for whom you make those decisions. On the other hand, there has been many words, like many theses that local population benefited from the presence of international officials because they spent a lot of money in Kosovo. But if we see where do they spend that money, then we see that they rent the houses of the rich class of local population, because they do not live in the houses of poor people or middle class people. So all the money that they spend for the rents goes to those who already have it a lot. And likewise, they employ only the local population which speaks English, which again comes usually from the rich class, but it could come from the middle class in this case as well. And thirdly, they eat in the restaurants which are nice and fancy, who are again where again owners are rich locals, and 80% of the money poured into Kosovo during UNMIK and EULEX is for so-called technical assistance. So all this is shows that there is this myth that international presence helps economy of the locals, and this was not the case. However, we as a movement for self-determination, we are not against international presence in Kosovo, against presence of international community, but we are against present character of this presence. So we wouldn't like to see them ruling in Kosovo, but only advising, suggesting, helping, but not ruling, and ruling means having executive powers. 12 years under protectorate, first rather under administration and now after independence under protectorate, we could say that international protectorate in Kosovo rather protected our political elite from the people than the other way around. Because as long as international officials had executive powers over local politicians knew that they depend much more upon their obedience and servility toward international officials than from the votes of the people. Crisis management as a concept means that international community in Kosovo was careful about merely preventing explosion of crisis, which again was keeping us at the brink of the explosion, because all what they were seeking for is not to have explosion of crisis, and when this is your ultimate goal, then yes, they were successful, the crisis did not explode, but on the other hand, this is all what we got. So the crisis is there, is a kind of a reproduction of the possibilities and the conditions of these missions who merely care about not allowing crisis to explode. And in this sense, I think that international community was taking care especially what we can lose and how it can get worse, and not what we can gain and how it can get better. So with international community in Kosovo, what we had, what it was at the same time what we maximally could have. But again, I believe that this crisis management, which I would like to call rather as the paradigm of short-term stability, is linked with another issue, which I believe could be the cause of the paradigm of short-term stability. And that is the lowest common denominator between different international factors, be they state factors or economic, financial, etc. So we have seen in Kosovo that international community is neither international nor a community, that in United Nations, nations are not really united, that United Nations is a battleground and Kosovo is the peace ground. So in Kosovo, they could have peace among themselves and not really in peace organizations where they were getting together. So consequently, their peace was not their peace, our peace was not our peace, but their peace was our peace and our peace was their peace. And when we speak about the peace in this international administration, international protectorate, it is not peace building. So it is not a science. It is not a construction which has been constructed, and we have been working there, and we finally got that construction. We didn't have peace building. We didn't have even peace creation. So it was neither an art. It was not an artwork. It was not that once you create it and then it's there. So you don't really build it, but you create it. It was not art. I think it was industry. It was peacemaking. It was a serious product. So peace in the making, in the sense that peace is being made every day. If you see the billboards of KFOR and UNMIK after the war, you create the impression that every day is another day with this product called peace, which you can enjoy thanks to international community. So every day was another day where you could consume this always same product called peace. And again, is within this paradigm of short-term stability and crisis management. So instead of having sustainable development in Kosovo, we had only short-term stability. And as a result, we could say that international missions in Kosovo were not post-conflict and are not post-conflict, but pre-conflict, in the sense that they are post-conflict physically, but politically they are pre-conflict because they are prior to a conflict that should not reoccur. So physically, it is true that international missions came after the war, after the conflict, but they are in Kosovo, so the conflict should not reoccur rather than developing the country. So short-term stability, crisis management, means that international community in Kosovo politically is pre-conflict, it's not post-conflict. Also from big powers, we have been categorized as a crisis, and we are being continually compared with other crises like Afghanistan, Palestine, etc. And we are put in this shelf which is written crisis, and not in this other shelf where it writes normal countries. So improvement in Kosovo is never sustainable by definition, because what we need is to change the category, to change the shelf from crisis to normal countries. And this implies a process of normalization, which further on implies a normal reference. So we shall be compared with, let's say, Slovenia, even though the result might be -10, rather than keep us comparing with Afghanistan, where the result might be +2. So it's better to have this -10 mark than +2. And I could say that Kosovo, in this sense, is the opposite of Greece. In Greece, you have a normal country with abnormal situation. In Kosovo, you have not that normal country, but nevertheless with normal situation, which is being described with this buzz sentence, calm but tense, which dominates the reports of international officials from Pristina to their capitals. Calm but tense means this. Calm means better than in Afghanistan. Tense means we have to stay here. So, more or less, this is the first problem we have with EU, which we see as a continuation of UN, in the sense that with Declaration of Independence of Kosovo, we got a new name, but not new substance, because Kosovo is an independent parliamentarian republic in name, but on the ground didn't change much. But again, what we got different is another name for international rule. Used to be UN, now it is EU. So Kosova got a new name, protectorate got a new name, but not much of different substance nor different character. So the fact that EU, therefore, is not building a state or helping us to build a state, but is directly building a member state is a key problem that we have as a movement with EU involvement in Kosovo. We would like Kosovo to have the right to join EU, but you see this is impossible because EU comes as an answer which should block the questions. We are not allowed to ask ourselves what kind of society and country we want, and then to have EU as a part of the answer. No, EU first comes as the answer, because they are directly building member state, and you are not simply allowed to have a question, which goes, of course, against self-determination as idea. The second big problem that we have with the international protectorate is in relation with present negotiations in Brussels with Serbia, and in this triangle Belgrade, Pristina, Brussels. Let me start by saying that with the disintegration of Soviet Union, we ended up with big octopus. Russia with its tentacles, Belarus, Ukraine after Timoshenko and Yushchenko were overthrown and Yanukovych got back, Transnistria, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, but also Kyrgyzstan and Armenia. So I would now try to build a sort of imaginary of some geopolitics in which Kosovo takes place as well. So after collapse of Soviet Union, we have a big octopus in northeast. With disintegration of Yugoslavia, we ended up with a small octopus. Small octopus, of course, means Serbia plus its tentacles. Republika Srpska in Bosnia, 30% of the population in Montenegro who declared themselves Serbs because they were against independence of Montenegro. North of Kosovo and the enclaves which are under the control of the parallel structures, and Serbian Orthodox Church all over in Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia, etc. So we have big octopus and small octopus. Brussels wants to separate big octopus from small octopus, or rather wants to separate small octopus from big octopus. That's fine with us. But Kosovo should not pay the price for that. We Albanians should not pay the price for that. It seems that Brussels is ready to make Kosovo pay the price for that by allowing Serbia to have a sort of Serbian territorial autonomous entity within Kosovo, just in order to take it from the Russian influence. With the inclusion of Bulgaria and Romania in its own yard, Serbia plays a sort of a Trojan horse of Russia in European soil, because Serbia owes her existence even to Russia. I think that the autonomy of Serbia and statehood of Serbia in the 19th century was a concession of Ottoman Empire to Russian Empire. So finally, EU wants to take over Serbia, but is willing to pressure Albanians and Kosovo to pay the price for that. So this is the second problem, big problem that we have with the EU involvement in Kosovo. This does not mean that Kosovar people and we as a movement are against EU integration. On the contrary, but these are the real politics of today. I believe that Serbia doesn't really want partition of Bosnia and Kosovo, but wants further internal division of these two, and consequently to render them dysfunctional. With partition, Serbia would lose control. What Serbia wants is precisely control through its satellites in the Balkans, in playing and establishing its role as small Russia in the Balkans. And regional stability gives credit to key potential destabilizers in the region. And this is where Serbia, I think, understood the game and is trying to become, again, key factor in this part of the Balkans. I think that part of the problem is the fact that President Tadic is overrated by Brussels. He could be a bit different once you look at him from Brussels, Washington, D.C. or New York, but certainly not if you look at Belgrade, Tadic, and his predecessors from Pristina. And it's a bit now a long thing to explain, but I think that there are no new Serbian leaders in Belgrade after Nikola Pasic. I think they just replicate that model. Serbia cannot be a different Serbia as long as we have no heritage of Dimitrije Tucovic legacy in Serbia. So what Serbia wants is Republika Srpska light in Kosovo, and secondly wants to enter into EU before Kosovo and to do to Kosovo what Greece is doing to Macedonia. In this sense, Kosovo, if Serbia's plans will be accomplished, will end up with Bosnia and Macedonia in one. Internally will become like Bosnia, and externally like Macedonia, which is being conditioned by Greece. As you all remember, in Dayton, 1995, Milosevic recognized Bosnia outside Serbia when Alija Izetbegovic, president of Bosnia, recognized Serbia inside Bosnia. So they have to make sure that first they have an entity inside you, so they let you go from them. And I think it is the same model, the same game that as Milosevic used to play, Tadic is playing today. And further on, you all remember how Milosevic used to say to Holbrooke and to European Union that if you don't talk to me, Šešelj is waiting behind the door. The same is doing Tadic, saying if you do not talk to me, Nikolic is waiting behind the door. So in this sense, total occupation of Milosevic Serbia, possession of Kosovo as such, would have been replaced with total control of Kosovo by Tadic Serbia by putting Kosovo into sandwich. They would condition us internally through this Republika Srpska light that Tadic wants, and also externally from the position of a country which became EU member prior to Kosovo. One thing what international protectorate in Kosovo destroyed, but also did not allow, did not create conditions to happen, was local production. In the year 1999, when UNMIK arrived, those were probably best years of neoliberalism, and they told us that you should forget about big enterprises, you should rely on small and medium enterprises. They destroyed the unions, and they started this neoliberal privatization where everything, socially and publicly owned enterprises, they started to sell very fast and very cheap. Of course, this was based on this doctrine of free market fundamentalists who think that hidden hand of the market will fix everything. They promised us market economy, but we ended up with market without economy. So this had tremendous consequences for Kosovo, because without production we had no planning, no vision for society. It is the production which organizes planning, and I think it has impact also in mental structure of people, in the sense that services and finances are this virtual and short-term dimension, while production is this long-term and real dimension. Production collectivizes people, while consumption individualizes people. Without production, we in Kosovo had a lot of nepotism and provincial, let's say almost primitive bonds, which were paradoxically necessary for survival, but absolutely insufficient for development. We ended up with huge trade deficit. Today, export-import ratio in Kosovo is 1 to 11. And we have all these neoliberal policies where, for example, the cost of oil oil has the same price for tractors and for the jeeps of the ministers, and VAT is flat 16% for milk for the children, and for whiskey, Chivas Regal, and all other luxuries is the same VAT. Kosovo became a country where you have merely circulation of capital, but not accumulation of capital. So in this sense, Kosovo is more of a transit country and not country in transition. What we lacked was precisely transition. With arrival of UNMIK in Kosovo, with fast UNMIK regulations, we had abrupt change to neoliberalism. Because transition implies some smooth process of passage from one stage to another. But what we lacked was precisely transition. So they call us country in transition, but what we are actually is transit country, where the entire investment is in highways with smooth asphalt and no factories. I was counting one day in my trip from Pristina to Peja, these are two towns of Kosovo, 32 trucks, only 4 of them were with car plates of Kosovo, all with Serbia, Macedonia, etc. So we built infrastructure, but there is no local production. I would like to use here now a bit one Mexican movie director and Deleuzian philosopher Manuel de Landa. He makes this distinction between metropolis and nation state. Nation state is, we know, metropolis is like San Francisco, Amsterdam, or Hong Kong, while nation state is about control of territory and borders. Metropolis is about control of traffic and flux. In nation state you need an army, it's about defense and protection. In metropolis you need police, and security is the key term. So precisely in Kosovo we have no army, but we have a lot of local and international police. So this is like infrastructure, asphalt, no factories. When economic development is not infrastructure. Infrastructure can be the carrier of economic development, but does not represent economic development as such. But the entire vision of international community in Kosovo after the war, in this international protectorate regarding economy, was you have to try harder and export. So we cannot guarantee you any kind of local production, but you have to compete in this free world, and then you find your own place in it. When they did not allow us to have the competences and to become sovereign, they said, you are just a newborn. You are still immature. It is us who should rule over you. But then, when it came to economy, they said, well, this is a free world, you can act there on your own. So politically, they considered us immature, and they considered us as a grown person, grown people economically. And so for different things that we asked throughout these 12 years from international community, they said that, oh, you don't have a status. Status has not been resolved, status has not been decided till we declared independence. But for privatization process, status was no obstacle. To play football with some other country, we couldn't because status was not there. But to sell the country, status didn't matter. So I would like now to recall in this, Naomi Klein has a nice example that she uses from her experience. She said, well, when we were activists, we were projecting with PowerPoint on the wall different things like subversive in the part of resistance, and taking care of small details of what we show, what we present in that PowerPoint. And finally, one day, we found out that they have sold the wall. So this is what has been done to us in Kosovo as well. They allowed to us presentation and representation, but not ownership. And still today, they allow to us, I am an MP, they allow us to present and represent other people, to be in the parliament, to speak, but not ownership in the process. No sovereignty, no army, no control of natural resources, no control of the borders and of territory, and no saying in key political and economic process. Finally, I would like to use a sort of a metaphor for the 90s while we were under Serbia's occupation and under international protectorate. Especially from the year 1989, when Kosovo's autonomy was abolished, till 1999, when war ended, Kosovo was like a political prisoner. 2 million people were like a political prisoner who is in a very harsh prison. You are being beaten there every day, ill-treated, tortured. But nevertheless, you have political subjectivity because for which you are considered to be dangerous. So you are considered to be dangerous, and therefore they isolate you and they lock you in. They don't let you out. So the 90s were like a terrible prison. We were hated, but paradoxically respected for our political convictions, and meanwhile you were tortured and you could pay with your life for your political convictions. With the arrival of international administration and later on protectorate, after declaration of independence, we could say that it's rather protectorate than administration. We got out from prison, but we entered hospital. So we are now like in hospital. We are now not anymore political prisoners, but we are patients. And patients are not entitled to the right to self-determination. It is doctors and nurses who decide about the patients. Of course, they don't beat us anymore, they don't torture or ill-treat us, but nevertheless, they decide about us. Patient is in a wait line, patient should be patient, and patient is an advisor to the doctor who takes decision for him instead of him or her. So we used to be in this harsh prison for 10 years, and it is already 12 years in hospital. So we are like this patient which is being intensively visited by the doctor, and for whose condition doctor says that it is calm but tense. Thank you.
However much antagonism there is between Pristina and Belgrade, I think it would be easier to make the case that people in the region have much more interests in common in opposing international limitations on their self-determination and sovereignty, rather than making the case, rather than enhancing antagonism and competition between national capitals. There is a real opportunity to build solidarity between the countries there and to break out of their history of rivalry.
Serbia does not recognize independence of Kosovo. So we cannot have any joint projects with Serbia as long as Serbia is contesting my being. It's only 12 years after the war in which they've killed 12,000 civilians, thousands of women were raped, 1,800 missing persons still. The remains of them have not been returned to Kosovo. Serbia is financing parallel structures inside Kosovo who control a quarter of the territory and work every day to undermine from within independence. In Constitution of Republic of Serbia is written that Kosovo is part of Serbia, which makes constitutional obligation for Boris Tadic to destroy independence. So with Serbia, with which we do not have peace agreement, we are in a sort of a state of war without war. So we cannot have a joint project with Serbia as long as Serbia does not recognize Kosovo, does not apologize for the crimes of the past, does not deliver war criminals. Because in former Yugoslavia, close to 200,000 non-Serbs were killed. Croats, Bosniaks, Slovenes, and Albanians. If one person killed 5, this means that you have 40,000 serial murderers walking free in Serbia. And not even a dozen of them are in prison. They are in state apparatus. So you see, under these conditions, we absolutely cannot trust Serbia in any kind of joint project. Serbia wants to do to Kosovo what used to do to Bosnia. Don't you know that Bosnia does not recognize Kosovo because of veto power of Milorad Dodik in Republika Srpska? Bosniaks and Croats are pro-recognition of independence of Kosovo, but because of Republika Srpska they don't. So, to have any kind of common project, it is not me who should change, it is Serbia who should change. It's not fair to make pressure on me to change when it is Serbia who should change. Because I do not, in principle, exclude joint projects in the future, but I exclude any kind of joint project without principles and without conditions for Serbia. It is a long story now to analyze EU as such. I rather analyzed in the beginning European security and defense policy in its missions, EULEX being in Kosovo, foreign policy of EU, again in relation to Kosovo, because we could elaborate a bit more, but it's too long now because Robert Cooper, I believe, represents the key figure into this. He has this book, Postmodern State. He believes in new liberal imperialism. He thinks that the world should be, as Ernest Gellner wrote, he thinks that the world should be rather like Vienna Congress 1815, then Versailles Conference 1919. So he believes in empires, like what used to be Austro-Hungarian Empire. Habsburgs should be EU. Romanovs and Tsarist Russia should Putin's Russia. And Ottoman Empire, US and Turkey again. So, but again, it's a long story this, because he thinks of these, let's say, flexible sovereignties, where EU is not supranational, but transnational. So EU as something more than US, more than UN, less than US, but certainly toward US. A kind of federalist vision. Van Rompuy is, by his conviction, also federalist. We could discuss long about this, but you see that this impossibility of cooperation with Serbia.
And what about the people rather than the elites? Why is it just the Serbian state rather than people that also resist the EU imposing neoliberal policies and stuff?
Well, for example, Serbs in Kosovo, for them, Serbia has a big carrot and a stick to discipline them and to attract them. On the other hand, our government offers them a small carrot, and we know the result. So we do not know what Serbs of Kosovo want, because we cannot listen to them. They do not allow them to listen to them, since you have mediation of parallel structures there immediately. If some Serbs of Kosovo start some cooperation without knowledge of Belgrade, immediately parallel structures intervene. And you have many cases where Serbs of Kosovo were beaten, ill-treated, if they tried to integrate in Kosovar society without plans and knowledge of Belgrade. So Belgrade allows Serbian representatives to integrate inside the institutions of Kosovo to use their veto power there, but does not allow ordinary citizens to integrate, because it will lose the leverage there. And integration does not happen because people want to integrate. Integration happens because it's necessary for people to integrate. Albanians who are in London, they are integrated in British society because it's necessary for them to integrate. I know many people in Kosovo who do not want to integrate. For example, some very rich people who want to live in their world, they don't want to integrate. And it's unnecessary for them to integrate. And Belgrade is doing everything to make unnecessary for Serbs of Kosovo to integrate. And Serbs of Kosovo will lose money if they integrate. So that's why this, again, question of sovereignty and political will of our government, we must block intrusion of Serbia in Kosovo. Yes to minority rights, to integration of Serbs of Kosovo, but no to Serbia. As long as Serbia can dictate over the social, political, and institutional life of Serbs of Kosovo, it is impossible for us to integrate them. Even in Bosnia, where Serbs are over 1 million, they could not develop an independent political and intellectual elite from Belgrade, and let alone in Kosovo, where Serbs are only 130,000.
You mentioned that what's missing is building a state as opposed to building a member state, and you mentioned that you're not naturally averse to the idea of having an international presence in Kosovo as such. So my question would be, how would you see building a sustainable development, this is what you said, in the context of building a state without having as an extensive presence as we've seen so far? So what would your idea be?
So what we would like from international community is to send to Kosovo professors, doctors, experts on agriculture, and not policemen, judges, and prosecutors with immunity from legal prosecution. So we need paradigm shift from short-term stability to sustainable development. And at the same time, we need time limit. I'm not saying that EULEX tonight should pack all their suitcases. Maybe they will need a month or 3 months. But we should have a time limit, and to change the character of international presence, because we're not against international presence. We need a lot of help. We live in quite interconnected world, but we need to change this character. Let's develop, because even UNMIK, I must admit, had some sense in the year 1999. Peacemaking, emergency phase, humanitarian aid, return of refugees, all these kind of things. But then in the year 2000, I believe, when we were about to pass the development phase, UNMIK failed, because by definition, it could not develop us.
I would ask you, we're talking a lot about sovereignty. If you were to choose for your country, would you rather join the European Union or Albania?
I think that we're not going to join EU before 2020 or 2025. And again, EU is trying to understand itself in its dream through us who are caught in EU dream, as I said. So I'm not sure that they have a clear vision. I think that in Eastern Europe, especially in the Balkans, when you say joining Europe, there is this false collective imaginary that we are joining a flat organization. There is a pyramid, and you could be integrated at the bottom of the pyramid or somewhere up, but of course not at the top. So it's very important to be strong when you enter EU, because the time when by entering EU you got automatically stronger, I think, is behind us. Ireland, Greece, Portugal could get money for their infrastructure when they entered. No such money is available anymore. So I think that Kosovo should get stronger. Kosovo should get sovereignty, and sovereignty would imply the right to join Albania. And I think that it is up to people to decide about that. If people of Kosovo and people of Albania want to join in one country, I think let them join. I believe that there are things that we could gain by having this unification in the sense of economic interest and security interest.